Let's talk disability and sex. The following video touches on sensitive topics and may not be suitable for all audiences. The views expressed in this video may not be reflective of those held by Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital. Those interviewed have provided their consent to be filmed for educational purposes and have approved all content in this video. Meet Fran, an educator who works on issues of sexuality and disability.
Hi everyone, my name is Fran Odette, and I go by the pronouns she, her, and they. I'm also someone that identifies as part of the queer community. I am someone who is a wheelchair user. I am light skinned, somewhat short stature. I have salt and pepper short hair, cut behind the ears, and I wear 2 hearing aids. One is purple, one is blue. I also wear glasses, and on the rim I have blue, orange, and yellow triangles. And I'm wearing a kind of a magenta purple shirt. I am an educator. I'm a teacher at a community college here in Toronto.
Why do some people find sexuality hard to talk about?
Think about why the conversation around sexuality and disability is so difficult. I think a lot about my own experience. So when I was growing up, I went to a segregated school here in Toronto, and the topic of sexuality was never broached. It was like it was off the radar. And it was really only when I was kind of heading out into mainstream school that the teacher that I had, said, I think it's time for folks to acknowledge that you all in this classroom have a sexuality. And I remember this day very clearly that, she closed the door and, she kind of suggested that the conversation that we were going to have was actually one that was not going to be well supported outside of, the room. And I think that she knew that within the, school, that the topic of sexuality was so very taboo. Parents didn't want to talk about it. Teachers didn't want to talk about it. But all of us were thinking about it, absolutely, and trying to make sense of whether we were going to be sexual and what would that look like and who would love us, and, knowing our capacity to love and be desirable. Those were all questions at the age of, 12, 13, 14, and maybe even younger that we were starting to think about. And I think part of the challenge around why this topic is so difficult is because we live in a culture that is very phobic around sexuality. Phobic in the way that, there's sort of this sensationalizing of sexuality. We see it in the media representations. We see it in the ways that sexuality is spoken about. But in no places within media do we see disabled folks being sexual or being perceived as desirable or, wanting to be thinking about sexuality in their own lives. And so it seems like, sexuality and disability are these kind of 2 separate, topics that never somehow come together.
What is your experience?
When I came home after that day in school, I talked to my mom and I said, hey, we talked about sex today, and I thought she was going to drop on the floor. But, she rallied and she did the best that she could in answering some of those questions, but I would say that probably sexuality in her own life was not spoken about. And so here we're asking parents to think about, the sexuality possibilities for their children, and even more so for their children with disabilities. But we don't know people's histories. And maybe being able to get some support in having those conversations can really challenge those barriers that exist in people's minds that don't want to acknowledge that people with disabilities are interested in sexuality, are desired, are wanting to think about healthy sexuality as part of their experiences.
What can make having conversations easier?
Think about what would make a difference to make this conversation easier. Our work as providers, I think, is to create a space of safety. To have someone that young person can trust that is going to respond to them from a place of dignity, non-judgment, having a safe space where people get to see themselves represented. I think that's one of the other challenges around why we're still having these conversations around sexuality and disability is because there really is a lack of representation of disabled folks living their lives, which includes, being sexual and being sexual beings. And also the flip side of that is that not all of us want to be sexual. And I think we need to acknowledge that as well, and to not see that as strange or unusual. Asexuality is also along this continuum of ways that people express themselves, and as part of sex positivity is also thinking about, what if I don't want that? What if I don't, feel that way? Am I strange? No, it's all part of the bigger conversation that we need to be having with young people around what are the options and what are the choices available. I also think that sometimes just being able to have access to information that speaks to our experiences can be huge. Having someone who is talking about their own lived experience is a way that young person can go, oh, this is possible for me. This is something that I can think about. And I think that's so key to how we can make those conversations easier, is even if it's a parent that struggles with being able to have that conversation, to have access to those resources, to be able to introduce the topic to that young person to say, here are some resources for you, and we can go through that together. Sometimes I think when we are the ones to say, I am here, and I'm able to have that conversation when you're ready, is a really important start.
What are your best hopes for future conversations?
When I think about what my hopes are for a conversation, one is, I think, to be able to convey to that young person that who you are is perfectly fine. That you're asking those questions is normal. I don't love that word normal. I use that in quotes, but I think our work is really about normalizing those conversations and not, treating them as like something special, but really go, oh, this is part of like the developmental phases that many of us go through. And this is also part of those developmental phases, is to have questions around sexuality and to be able to have someone that that young person can trust and feel comfortable with, to ask those questions, and to maybe not have the one single answer, but to be able to provide some opportunities for thinking about different kinds of answers that are going to work best for them. And I think also just kind of speaking before about, you being the one that might just say, I'm here, might be enough for that person to come back to you to have a future conversation. May not be, in that moment, but to know that your door is open, I think is huge, especially for many of us who have, grew up at a time when sexuality and a disability were like so taboo, and there was so much effort to dissuade disabled people from even thinking about being sexual. Either being sexual and expressing our sexuality with ourselves or with someone else. That we need to kind of challenge this history, and the time is right now for us to create spaces for younger people to see their own experiences in a positive way, and to see their interests and their desires and their wants in positive ways, as opposed to us so quickly closing the door on those dreams and hopes.
The creation of these videos was made possible by the Social Science and Humanities Research Council of Canada, the Promoting a Future of Inclusive Healthy Lifestyles for Everyone Lab at the Bloorview Research Institute, and the Kimmel Family Opportunities Fund through the Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital Foundation. This video was created by Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital, led by the Profile Lab, part of the Bloorview Research Institute, and Evidence to Care, part of the Teaching and Learning Institute. The lived experience shared in this video is by Fran Odette, a faculty member at George Brown College in the Assaulted Women's and Children's Counselor, Advocate, and Social Service Worker programs. This video has been narrated by Wesley McGee Saxton, a youth leader at Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital. The Profile Lab conducts research around health and wellness topics that healthcare professionals, parents, and young people with disabilities often find hard to talk about. For more information, email Dr. Amy McPherson at amcpherson@hollandbloorview.ca.